Beginnings, Intuitive Encaustic. Hello, my name is Shary Bartlett and I'm an artist from Vancouver, Canada. Welcome to my studio and thank you for watching today. This video is called Daily Beginnings and I explore intuitive encaustic and mindful composition. Today, I'm going to share with you a short 15 to 20 minute exercise, and it's a painting technique that emerged from my personal meditation practice. I talk a bit about how this came about in my artist portrait, so I encourage you to watch that. I try to follow a daily meditation practice, and I've discovered that a funny thing happens. A meditative flow state leaves me itching to paint. And my natural predilection for this mindset is to work slowly and mindfully and intuitively as I paint, making marks with lines and color. In this manner, I create a substrate that I later develop further with the application of encaustic wax. This technique can be preceded by a personal meditation or a ritual, or it can be a standalone warm-up exercise for painting. It only takes about 15 or 20 minutes to complete your painting session, and I use easy encaustic techniques that are simple with a minimum of supplies and setup so that it's easy and doable, and the outcome of this practice is a new painting every few days. Win-win. It's important to say here that there's no need for you to follow my technique and my abstract style, but it's important to follow your own heart, to make your own marks, to explore your own creative voice. This creative collage painting process that I'm going to share with you here can be applied to various styles, such as representational painting, or portraiture, or landscape, or printmaking, so just follow your own interests when you try this technique. First, let's talk about general supplies and tools used in this video. As you well know, encaustic involves a good deal of equipment setup and time. And because this mindful, intuitive painting practice is designed as a simple 20-minute daily session, I use a minimum of equipment. I keep these at the ready at my workstation to make my quick morning exercise easy each day. Now, I prefer a white encaustic medium with the yellow pollen removed, but I've also used a more yellow wax in the video so you can see the difference. I use colored encaustic wax in stick form, and you may want to try out my custom colored paint set by Encausticos Paints. I use a frying pan with a lid, or you can use an encaustic iron to heat the wax. Use a silicone pad or another fireproof work surface. Silicone pads are great because they are so portable. I use a heat gun or an embossing tool sometimes, or you can use a torch. I'll talk about that a bit later. Natural bristle brushes for encaustic and watercolor painting. Watercolor or other paints that are compatible with wax. Magazine pictures or personal photos for collage. Acrylic gel medium or other glue. Pencils, felt pens, ink. Pan pastel and oil pigment sticks. Clay or dental or carving tools, and maybe, just maybe, some small mixed media treasures. I know you probably have many of those on hand. You'll want to use a temperature gauge to keep your wax at a safe working temperature of 200 degrees Fahrenheit or 93 degrees Celsius. Ensure that you have proper ventilation and a fire extinguisher. Preparing your substrates. Encaustic board by Ampersand Art Supplies is an easy choice for these quick exercises. It's prefabricated MDF hardboard coated with white encaustic gesso. Or you can use a hardboard painted with encaustic gesso, or a watercolor paper glued to a hardboard. Make sure that you glue the corners and sides very well. Or cradled wood panels painted with encaustic compatible paint. I like to prepare my cradled panels with a protected back using scrap paper and tape along the sides. Okay, let's start the first fun part, intuitive collage. Use a magazine picture or one of your own photos printed on paper and tear off a small section of the image that appeals to you for some reason. Perhaps it's the color or the linear appeal or the variety of pattern. I like to tear the photograph as I actually find the chamfered furrowed edge adds an interesting effect. If you prefer, you can achieve a clean line using scissors. Now glue this inspiration scrap very well to your board using gel medium. Burnish and let it dry for a moment. Make sure that all the edges of the picture get glued down well, or you may have problems later. Then creatively riff off this, joyfully and mindlessly responding with pencil or pen, and just see what emerges. Don't think too much. Stay present in the moment and observe closely the effects of your marks on the surface. You can add watercolor paint to follow the leads of your marks. You can also use encaustic compatible paint such as gouache or chalk paint, ink, water-soluble crayons, or any of your favorite encaustic compatible mark-making materials to expand your image. Believe me, this photo scrap will turn into a completely different image than the one you began with, and you'll make exciting discoveries. Try turning the painting in a different orientation to see if the design speaks to you more from one direction than from another. I try to let my brain turn off and just follow my heart and let my hand take the lead. This is the meditative and reflective part of the exercise. Don't get too busy or overdo or try to finish your painting at this early stage. Leave room for the major developments using encaustic. This is very much about your own personal exploration, and your hands and your heart will lead you. Be present in the process. Remember that the true product is the creative experience that takes place, not whether you come out with the perfect painting. This is a daily art exercise just for you. So be courageous, experiment, challenge yourself to literally paint outside of your box. The goal is to take chances while you try a different way of painting. For example, maybe focus on making lines that are geometric if you're accustomed to using organic lines. Use a new color that you usually hate. Choose a scrap from an architectural photo if you usually are inspired by nature. Go brave. But in short, it's not rocket science. Just let your creative spirit soar. Explore and see what emerges. And have fun! I outline in detail this first stage of preparing the substrate with encaustic-friendly tools and materials in a video called Beginner's Mind, Intuitive Flow Painting. I'm offering a special 50% discount for Painting with Fire students for this hour-long video. Only $30 compared to the regular price of $60. If you're interested in seeing this first stage of my process in detail, please check out my website to view this class. Techniques to treat your beginning underpainting. Tools, materials, and techniques. So, you've got an awesome underpainting and you're ready to develop it with wax. Congratulations. Heat only a little wax at a time in your frying pan. Warm the substrate surface with a heat gun. A heat gun is used for the first layer because of paper flammability. You can use a torch on the layers after if you prefer. Another easy way to warm your surface is by simply elevating it inside the skillet that you're using to heat your wax and place the cover for a minute or two. I like to apply 2 layers of smooth wax as a base. I heat the surface, add wax, fuse, let it cool a bit, and add another. I often add a 3rd layer to be able to heat the whole surface to a point which I call the skating rink effect, where the wax becomes a smooth and thin layer. Make sure that your work surface is level. The great thing about having an original and caustic-friendly underpainting on your substrate is that while you can always build up wax on its surface, you can also scrape or melt back the encaustic and return to your unaltered original image. I so enjoy seeing the textured edge of my original torn image inspiration secreted deep in the encaustic wax. Another simple heating tool is an encaustic iron to melt wax pellets on your underpainting directly. Smooth the surface by wiping off the excess wax between passes of the iron. I love beginning each painting with a smooth surface on which I can build texture, color, mixed media, and more. As part of intuitive painting, I pay attention to my senses, the aroma of the melting wax, the beauty of the light bouncing off the glaze, the sound of the brush grazing the surface, the texture of the wax under my fingertips. Usually for me, day 1 of the encaustic painting practice involves creating the underpainting. Day 2, I add a smooth layer of encaustic wax and possibly some texture or carving. And on day 3, I enhance and finish the painting with further surface interest. Maybe mixed media, maybe some colored paint, or maybe something else. In order to share this 20-minute practice with you, I videotaped the creation from start to finish of several encaustic paintings. I'm going to share the highlights of these videos with you. For Ember Blossom, I used a cradled hardboard painted with chalk paint. When I cover it with one layer of wax, you can still see a lot of the surface collage. Adding a second layer of wax adds smoothness. A third layer of wax levels the surface out even more. However, the depth of the wax begins to yellow the surface, so I decided to thin the encaustic using a clay loop tool. Have you built up too many layers of wax on top of your underpainting? Here's a thinning tool by Diamond Core Tools, which allows you to thin certain areas so the image underneath is more visible. Then, just reheat the whole board to achieve the skating rink effect, with both thicker and slimmer areas of wax surface that are visible. I let myself get quite carried away with texture and accretion. Accretion is a great way to add surface texture and visual interest. Brush lightly across the surface of your wax and fuse every 2 or 3 brushes. Experiment with accretion or adding drips of wax or layering. And if you find once it's cooled that you've added too many layers and it's difficult to see the marks beneath, just feel free to use a clay tool and remove some of the wax and fuse it again. My favorite elaboration of accretion is adding pan pastel by grazing the top surface of the wax. You'll find that the pastel sticks better to a slightly warmed surface. I like to use either a makeup applicator or one of these soft tools made by Pan Pastel. To clean the applicator, simply wipe it on a paper towel, or it can be gently washed with soap and water. If you like a bit of glimmer, try a metallic pastel on the top. Just don't overdo it. A little bit goes a long way. Hillcrest Homestead is an intuitive painting I began on watercolor paper glued to a cradled panel. Because the paper is so absorbent, you can see how much it yellowed with the application of wax. You can really see the opacity of the pan pastel here. If you want to hide or shade some part of the image underneath, pastel is a great choice for coverage. If you make a mark and change your mind, if you've not yet fused the pan pastels, you can usually remove the pigment using rubbing alcohol and a rag. You can achieve some lovely shading techniques, and it works wonders to blend the photo scrap into the wax. Just don't forget to fuse. This abstract painting entitled Chrysalis was done on encaustic board. I love this substrate because it heats so evenly and smoothly, and it's very easy to achieve a thin, clear layer of wax that doesn't yellow the surface. Once I've set up that smooth surface, I add textured lines with a coolish brush and lightly fuse. While I mentioned that pastel is great for a more opaque surface, oil pigment sticks, by contrast, are much more transparent and often allow the image beneath to appear very clearly. R&F and Cama pigment sticks are great at highlighting the peaks and valleys of a wax surface. Some pigment sticks are more translucent than others, and you can see this noted on the side of the stick. But because of their linseed oil base, I find all pigment sticks somewhat translucent when thinly applied to the wax. The sticks develop a skin on the outside which seals in the oil paint. You need only peel this top layer off to reveal the delicious pigment within. Use only a very thin layer of oil stick, as you have only a few layers of wax here. If you use too much pigment stick, it can't be absorbed into the surface. You can see how deliciously the pink and white oil sticks highlight the surface texture. Always lightly fuse oil stick into the wax surface, and be sure your heat gun or your torch is set on low and held at a distance. Otherwise, the oil will dissipate quickly and spread. Sometimes your encaustic painting meandering will lead in the direction of geometric lines. Here's a great technique using an oil stick, which is a sort of faux intaglio or carving in. In No Left Turn, I carve into the cool wax using a sharp tool, and then spread a thin layer of blending medium over the wax surface. This helps to clean off the excess oil pigment later. Press the oil pigment deeply into the excised surface of the wax. Here I'm blending two colors to create the desired shade. Then, use a rag or a paper towel to remove the excess pigment. Be aware that rags and paper towel that are soaked in oil are highly flammable, so ensure that you wet and dispose of your rags safely. I like to clean and remove that final surface of blending medium using a touch of rubbing alcohol. This was a fun painting, allowing a variety of possible orientations. You can see, with Gaia's breath, how the wax painted on the watercolor paper yellowed because of the absorbency of the paper, but it adds a wonderful sepia tone and warmth. I keep flipping this painting around. For me, it worked in a variety of orientations until I finally decided which way was up. The collaged photograph of a work yard was turned upside down in the final painting. I thinned the area away from my focal point so that the viewer could see the tiny details in the photo. Creating this painting, I got totally lost in the repetitive meditation of building up the roots and the trunk of the tree. Thick wax added a lot of possibilities for carving in three-dimensional texture to enhance that India ink line work. I used both ends of a diamond core clay carving tool. I love these tools for their variety of mark-making possibilities and the lack of wax burrs. Add a shading layer of pan pastel. And fuse. I got really carried away with the underpainting and wax on Blossom Breeze and finally decided it was a bit too busy. So I applied a mix of clear wax combined with white paint to mask and simplify the painting and to create an area for the eye to rest a bit. I did find that the glaze obscured a bit too much of the image, so then I removed some with a loop tool. While heating pots of pigment wax on a palette is a great way to color the surface of large paintings, it's a lot of setup for a quick 20-minute intuitive painting process. An easy way to color a small amount of wax is to either heat it directly in your palette or melt a small amount on aluminum foil in your multi-purpose skillet. Colored wax will bring a new dimension to your encaustic painting. Alternatively, an encaustic iron by Encaustic Art can also be adapted into a small palette. This is a great way to heat a small amount of wax for brush use, and it's a handy tool on your work table. Did I mention I got carried away with these lovely roots? Believe it or not, I developed them even further using an electric stylus. This is one of many kinds of styluses. I explore these fully in my instructional video called Luscious Lines that's available on my website. With this tool, you simply plug it in and melt a wee bit of encaustic paint directly using the hot tip. This tool performs as an amazing three-dimensional calligraphy pen, so your marks literally grow off the surface of your painting. Either use the stylus set on a low temperature, or use a stylus designed for encaustic, or use a temperature regulator to make sure the tool doesn't get too hot. And because you're using a hot tool, there's no need to fuse after. If you don't like the lines that you've drawn with your stylus, you can simply melt them to achieve very interesting effects. Encaustic artists hate to waste wax. It's so precious and expensive. I don't know about you, but I have bags and bags of these precious little scrapings. There are lots of ways to use leftover wax, but this is an easy way to integrate scraps into your daily intuitive wax painting practice. If one of your paintings looks like it could use a boost, consider adding three-dimensional wax highlights from your store of encaustic breadcrumbs. Warm the surface, press in your wax, and if you heat the wax just enough to fuse the surface to your painting, it will maintain its shape. Alternatively, attach, press in, and burnish the bits using a layer of wax paper between your painting and your burnishing tool. Heat, and voila! A thorough melt of your wax gems might reveal untold beauty. That's the magic of wax. It's got a mind of its own and you never know what it's going to do. Many of us have come to encaustic from a mixed media background and often are big collectors of tiny treasures. So when your painting needs a lift, add some mixed media bling. Choose objects that are light and small. Heat your wax surface and build your mixed media into the wax and fuse. You can always remove excess wax using a tool after. Here I'm using tiny microbeads and broken glass gems fused into the pigmented wax. You might recognize that couch from the beginning of the video. This mermaid in Siren's dream seemed to call out for a glamorous costume of aquamarine fish scales, and guess what I happen to have tucked into my Wunderkammer treasure chest. After adding a few layers of wax, I applied the sequins one by one. Burnished and fused them. I found some further enhancement for her outfit in some green gems and dripped some wax over top to fuse. I furthered the texture by adding and carving wax out with a tool. One of the very satisfying final rituals of painting is pulling off the tape and the protective backing to reveal that clean, naked surface ready for edging with acrylic or oil paint or cold wax or a shadow box frame. And don't forget the polishing ritual at the end to reveal that beautiful brilliance of encaustic. As your pictures progress, you may start to see a focal point, an image, or a story appear. Especially with abstract painting, the initial image can morph into all kinds of tales. I love that process of teasing the story out and then entitling my work at the end. So, in conclusion, just go for it. Carve in, build up, get lost in the beauty and the experience of the wax. Once you get on a roll, you'll find there's no stopping this entertaining, intuitive, and grounding encaustic painting practice. Remember, this is about experimenting and taking chances. Think of all of these wee painting sketches as trials. The more mistakes we make, the more we learn. All along the way of painting, we're consciously and unconsciously making decisions about composition. Am I adding too many layers? Is it too busy? Can the viewer determine the focal point? Am I ensuring that the viewer's eyes move through the painting? Have I left enough negative space for the eye to rest? I try to bring awareness to this conversation as it's happening in my head and to learn from it. This is the subject of the final video in this Daily Beginning series, Mindful Composition, in which I articulate the many compositional design-making choices that I made during this artistic play process, both consciously and unconsciously. I'll refer to the rules and the tools of composition, the elements and principles of design, and how these apply to the paintings that you watched emerge in the videos. This creative exercise and approach to encaustic painting helps find answers to the questions, what is my voice as an artist? How do I find confidence in the mark of my hand? How do I develop my eye for composition? And how do I buttress creativity and encaustic painting in my daily practice? I'd like to thank you for watching today, and I hope that I've piqued your interest to try this quick, intuitive painting process yourself. Only 15 minutes a day, and I guarantee it will bring pleasure to your daily beginnings. I look forward to seeing what you create. Oh, and if you're interested in seeing more details on creating the pre-encaustic underpainting, don't forget to check out the video on my website called Beginner's Mind Intuitive Flow Painting. In my Beginner's Mind introductory video, I explore in-depth techniques and approaches to intuitive flow painting, setting up the encaustic underpainting, tools, materials, and techniques, composition and design considerations, and much more.